The following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Why We Pod. I'm Rich Meranto, the owner-operator of Meranto Media and Merge, media creators. And the purpose of this podcast, as we said in our first episode, is really try to sit down with podcasters and talk to them about their pod, what they do, their best practices, why they do it, and what's the commonality which kind of drives all us podcasters together. So this is the second of a series of 5 interviews that I'm doing in my first series. And I'm excited because I have the other guests lined up, and I even have one that is not a member of Emerge, that I really have only worked with once before, and he's been doing his pod for a long time. So I'm really excited to see and hear what all these podcasters have to say. So today's guest is someone that I owe so much, because I don't think I'd even would have gotten in the podcasting if it wasn't for my guest today. Former student and now one of my best friends, I think. I don't know if he agrees with that, but one of my best friends, Matt Johnson.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is really cool.
So Matt and I have known each other forever, because Matt was my student when I was still a teacher at Niagara Falls High School.
2006, I was in the 10th grade.
So
my first run with media production class.
Matt, you really were one of my favorite students when I list kind of that, those goats that were ones that always kind of had something to do in studio. You always seemed to find a way to be involved,
Yes.
Whether it was, just helping on the morning show with audio, or just making your own videos and having your own ideas, or, throwing people in the garbage cans, things like that, Messing with Sasquatch was like
with Johnson.
was a thing at the time. So I don't know who made you. I don't know if it was your idea or you were just the biggest guy in the program.
I think it was Sean. We called him Spaz. But,
Oh, yeah.
He had a lot of ideas. We still keep in touch a little bit, not that often, but he had a lot of ideas. He basically did the Summit Mall rap video.
Yep.
He wrote all the lyrics out for that.
Right.
And I gave him the little, if I'm remembering correctly, I gave him the little push. I'm like, let's
Right.
go do something with this.
Yeah, you guys went and filmed at the old Sun Park Mall, which is in Niagara Falls, which is closed now. And it was, I think you guys walked around because there were still a few stores open.
It was the last day that it was open.
Oh, okay.
The last day ever, and we're like, all right, we got to get in there and do some stuff and things.
And that's what I mean. You were always finding ways to be creative. You were a high school wrestler, a very good wrestler.
Thank you.
Great career with that. And I think I think that kind of eventually led to what we're going to talk about how you getting into this. But so today's guest is Matt Johnson. And Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get into what we're doing?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, been here at Niagara Falls all my life. Always had something to do, right? Whether it's sports, photography, doing pro wrestling, podcasting has been such a big part of my life for the last now 7 years. Super important. Married, have a 10-month-old at home. I have nothing to complain about. I live a very good, fulfilling life, and I've always been busy. I've always had something very goal. I've always been very goal oriented. I should say, as far as just having something to do.
Well, I think let's, before we even get into the content creation of this, because obviously that was one of your goals at some point.
Yeah.
But you were a high school wrestler, very good high school wrestler, and you went very far. I think you went to states, right?
Yes, my senior year I took 6th in New York State.
That's amazing. That's an amazing journey.
Very, very proud of
especially in a state like New York with a lot of wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably because you were always, would you think that those early ages of spending time at the wrestling clubs and stuff, kind of set the standard that you kind of always had something to do? Do you think that had something to do with why you're still trying to be so creative and as you've gotten older?
I never really thought about it like that, but when you kind of put it that way, yeah. My parents always had me busy. Like when I was little, there's always sports, baseball, football,
right.
Tried basketball, stuff like that. But when I really hit my stride with wrestling, that was the first thing that I was ever good at. Right? It's something that I I have actually felt the reward for the work I put in.
Yep.
I felt like I received it. And that helped translate, I guess, with my mentality with, pro wrestling and now podcasting, where I'd rather, if someday I'm gonna stop, I'd rather look back and say, I literally did everything within my power that I could do, and I have zero regrets at the end of the day.
That's really cool that you said two things really there, because obviously I was a teacher for 31 years.
Yeah.
And what you just said was kind of my philosophy with teaching, was that like I had to keep trying. Like I couldn't rest on the fact that, well, the first 20 years I was really good with the kids. But I'm at the end. Like, no, I kept working hard to keep trying to find new things. So I would walk out the door that last time with no regrets that I had really thought that I did my best.
Yes.
Not every day. No one can be great every day, but you do your best to try to do that. And the other thing you said that I think is a commonality that I always thought with the teacher, it was always great to see or meet a kid and realize that they were good at something, and how much that kid transformed once he realized he was good at. He didn't have to be the best at something, but once he realized, hey, I'm good at that, or she's good at that, I feel like that transforms kids, and you just see them change and grow once that kind of happens.
It certainly does. Because I started wrestling in the 8th grade, and obviously hindsight being 2020, I was not very good. I won more matches than I lost, but it wasn't still very good wrestling. I really didn't hit my stride until my junior year, but I really wasn't good at stuff. Middle school was miserable for me. I had nothing. I went to school. I came home. It was basically about survival, right? I just tried to survive to the next day because it just wasn't fun. I didn't have a lot going for me. But as I started getting to wrestling, I finally hit that stride where it's not just a sport, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Even when the season's done with, okay, I'm going to go to this club. I'm going to go travel to these off-season tournaments. And my confidence level, not just as an athlete, but as a human being, skyrocketed once I finally found my niche, finally found something I could be good at.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And it's funny, and the reason I brought up wrestling is obviously that was in many ways, was that the first, because you got into the idea of podcasting before really anybody that I know. Like you were probably one of the first people that had this idea. And I think, am I incorrect, the first thing that you really kind of did was the wrestling stuff?
It was towards the front. So to be honest with you, my first grasp or desire to do podcasting was to do a Section 6 wrestling show.
Right.
That was 2 years before I actually started podcasting. But one thing, coaching, being around the sport, because I was coaching at Lewiston Porter at the time, is the media coverage was not very good on wrestling. It was horrendous. I remember it was the day after sectional championships in 2015. So I was actually volunteering in Niagara Falls at that time. The day after, there wasn't a single write-up in the Niagara Gazette about the sectional championships. And it's as somebody who's been there, who's has been shunned. I got not so much shunned.
No, I know what you mean.
But you do something
because it
really
wasn't
cool.
Basketball.
Yes,
it's not football.
Yes,
not even baseball.
They used to drive me nuts. Is that no matter
what? Those are the sports that would get coverage in your local media. And I don't care where you're living. My guess it's that, unless you happen to have some really amazing athlete or something that for some other reason transcends that. But most of the time, you're right. They only kind of focus on the three main guy sports, and that's about it.
Yeah, basketball, football, and you get baseball, but it's like these kids are still participating. Even soccer would get good coverage. And when I was in school, the Niagara Falls teams were not very good. And I don't mean that as a dig,
you're not wrong.
But the records are the records, and they were still getting more coverage than wrestling was. Period. Overall. So as I'm seeing this, and I had a friend in Rochester who runs his own network, the Gear Network. I don't know if he's still doing it or not. But I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something here, and I could cover local high school wrestling. I bought the microphone, never did anything with it for 2 years. But it would be my fourth podcast. But I start within the first 4 months of me starting podcasting. The Section 6 WrestleCast was on my regular. So
let's talk a little bit about the very first podcast that you really actually did. Who were you with? How did that happen? Just because, again, when you were doing this is the beginning of like before podcasts were anything. There weren't a lot. So how did you get that first one going?
Okay, so I was a part of a group, Facebook group called Game Heads United, run by a good friend, BJ Smith. He's turned it to a very nice business. But anyways, we were doing a weekly show on their Facebook Live where we just talk video games. We'd pick a subject, we'd do a couple giveaways and whatnot. And after like a couple months, we're like, man, we could do something more with this. This doesn't have to be just restricted to a Facebook show. Why don't we try to get into podcasting? So my buddy Christian Ham, he was at the Nickel City Comic Con, and he actually met the people that ran our network before, Chris Chavez, Anthony Mullen, and they pulled him over for something really quick and made a connection. And he discussed what we did, how we wanted to turn it into a podcast, and we met with these guys, and we had the green light to go. They were warm and receptive to us, the BICBP radio network, and they're like, yeah, come on, whatever you want to do. So our very first show was video game. It was called the Push Start Podcast. It was myself and Christian Ham. We'd get together, and the first recording was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah,
it was so bad.
Where were you doing this?
He was. We were at his apartment.
Okay.
He had a cool little apartment. There was. We had like a glass display in the back, so we would prop it. We'd set up props.
Right.
And we'd had a table, and we basically used I had a Google Chromebook, which I would not recommend for anybody doing podcasting. Very limited in its capabilities. And a USB mic, a Yeti microphone. And it sounded terrible. And it was just...
So one mic.
It was one mic.
One mic for three guys.
Oh, just the two. Just the two.
Just the two.
Me, myself, and Christian. And we did it. And as soon as I got that first taste, it was like blood in the water.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, now I want to do football.
Right.
Now I want to do a comic book one. Now I want to do wrestling.
Yep.
Let's just go.
So right away you were doing, I feel like when you reached out to me, you at that point, I think you had 2 or 3 going by the time you and I kind of reconnected.
It was about when the first episode you came on, I was probably 5 or 6 deep at that point.
No, yeah, but I mean, even before that, like prior, like in the late, 20 teens, like I feel like you started. When did you start like 2 Point Conversation?
That was the second show. Like after I got that first taste of the video game show, I said, "Hey, I want to do a football show,"
and that was a big deal. Like for me, like I remember seeing that, and that was it had a lot of frequency.
Yes,
you had a lot of episodes of that show.
Very exhausting. It drove my wife absolutely insane, but I loved football so much that I just wanted to talk about it. And it started off 1 day a week. It became 2 days a week, where we were just doing, okay, here's current stuff, and then here's NFL history.
Right.
And eventually, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I have to be different from every other generic sports football podcast. I have to go every day, right? The good ones are going every day. ESPN goes every day. NFL Network every day.
And it's funny because obviously that was for not being having a full-time job and a wife and and she had her thing and you had your job, and it was like, but I think like you understood early on something that a lot of content creators don't understand now.
Yeah.
That you got to put out a lot of content. And it doesn't all have to be a podcast, but you have to have, if you want to really keep growing, you got to I got to do like an Instagram live from a Comic-Con or whatever. You have to have, you can't just drop 5 pods, but you got to have other things. Whether it's, let's do a live stream of a game, or let's just do a product review or whatever. Just keep dropping. I think you guys early on understood the importance of just having a lot of content and current and consistency.
Yes, that was so important to us because, especially the NFL. I mean, pro sports changes every day, but the National Football League is every day. There's some kind of news going on. So that was a thing. And even if we couldn't record every day, the social media page was ready to go. Our Facebook. Before I said I've had enough, was over 26,000 likes.
Yeah.
People following it, and because we'd post news, we'd make memes up. We post all sorts
And
of
I
stuff.
didn't listen on a regular basis, but I would quite often listen. And you know, I want to say that the quality of that show as it grew got really good. Not just the content, but also the production quality. I
Yeah.
felt like the audio got really good. How did you guys, because obviously at some point you said we got to upgrade our mics or we've got to how did you guys do that? Like,
Well,
because you were at this point, you still didn't have you had a couple locations, and we'll get into the locations. But were you still in a house at this point, or
sorry,
Yeah.
the first year and a half, I was at my apartment, and we eventually found a studio where we could start moving to stuff. It wasn't very good. There was a whole thing that led us to the second studio, but yeah, it was understanding like soundproofing, like having like the rooms were important. You know, I was in a wide open wood floor room that had nothing to stop sound and sound.
Well, it's funny
bouncing up
because obviously I was a high school teacher and I ran a media program for close to 20 years. And one of the things that happened is like, all right, I'm getting the end of my career and I've got to start doing my own stuff.
Yeah.
So someone hired me to do a commercial. And obviously I could not use my school. That's a conflict of interest. Well, come on by my house. And I borrowed a camera from my buddy that, you know, because I couldn't borrow your camera for the day because I want to see if I like your camera. I ended up buying my own right after that. But it was awful. It was the worst thing I ever did. I was embarrassed. I'm in my garage. Fire truck came by. My dog was barking. It was just awful. It was embarrassing. And I had enough expertise how to fix it. But I just said to my wife, I'm like, this is awful. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to do video production work when I retire, then I need to buy my own equipment. I need to have a place to do it. And then eventually that turned into this ridiculous endeavor. But you're right. Like, you don't realize, like, you do the first 5 episodes of something and all of a sudden you're like, it's not bad. Then you look back at those episodes and like, oh my God. But again, I think most people understand that there's a growth process.
My mentality with any kind of art that I've done is, if I'm recording a podcast, if I'm out on a photography adventure, if I'm looking back at film from a pro wrestling match that I did, is to pick out 5 to 10 things that I hated about it, and the next time I did it, improve upon that. There was the stretch of there's a very long stretch, and I do this now because I'm a little out of practice, but I'm getting back to it, where I'd fill dead space with or there's all these dead space filler words, when it's okay to have a little bit of silence. But those are early rookie mistakes, and after a while, people start catching on in that.
Right.
And I started hearing it. Drive me nuts when I hear myself. You say or
and I think a lot of people don't go back and listen to what they just did.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like a sense of denial that you don't want to be self-critical. Like, people are afraid to be self-critical.
Yeah, you have to. You absolutely have to be aware. Because if you start, like, one thing, there was a little stretch where we got stale, and I started like believing my own hype in my mind that this show was great. This is nothing. It could be. It can't get much better than this.
Right.
And that's, as a content creator, that is one of the worst possible things you could ever do to yourself, because you're limiting yourself. If you're not growing, every episode, every video, every couple videos, then you're stale.
If you're doing it just because you just want something to do, fine. But if you're doing it and you're expecting to grow your brand and you want it to become something, then what you and I are talking about is kind of important. That I got to have good mics and I've got to, like, make sure my short content or my posts or whatever, my thumbnails, whatever it is, what can you do to improve what you're doing?
Yeah.
So obviously you're doing that one. But you were also doing like 2 or 3 other pods at that time in the early 2020s.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. I just loved it.
You had a gaming one. You had a fandom one.
Yeah, the comic book one, the wrestling one, and it blew up into other stuff. I'd take one out and I'd add 2 more.
Right.
I was like, I got to cut back. No, I don't. Because much like wrestling, I found something that I liked and was good at.
Right.
And I tried my best to be the best version of it.
Now, I want to make sure we get to this because it's important to me. Like, I talked about in my first interview, the support of my spouse.
Yes.
So I'm sure there were times she's like, oh, again. But at the same time, from what I know of your wife, she's super supportive to all your endeavors.
Yes, her face may not say it all the time, but she is, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to get a studio and get out of the apartment was
Right.
because she's up very early in the morning.
Yeah.
2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Shout
getting
out
ready for work.
to Amy and Company.
Amy and Co Cafe, 6926 Buffalo Avenue in Niagara Falls.
It's the best breakfast sandwiches you will ever have.
Yes.
Like, the only sad thing about me moving my business is I don't go to LaSalle, where they are on Buffalo Avenue, as often as I used to. So I don't go as often as I used to. And every once in a while, I'm like, I got to go over there and get a breakfast sandwich. So, and I go way out of my way. Because again, I'm in the opposite end of town. But I mean, like, that's a great little business, and it's just, it's family owned, obviously. And so, check it out if you're ever in Niagara Falls.
She does a great job. But I was like, this is not fair. Like, this is almost selfish of me to be doing this 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and plus I'm in a duplex. There's older people. There's an older couple underneath us. Like, this just is.
Talk about NT, because obviously at one point you had started with something that didn't work out, and you had this idea that you needed a space, and a lot of what I've done is inspired by what you did. So talk a little bit about the space that you had for a while.
Absolutely. So we called it the Podcast Precinct. We just closed it this past January, and I know you've been giving me a lot of credit too, but come on, I got to give you your props. All this, the whole idea of the Podcast Precinct was inspired by your nook at the high school. All the cool stuff all the cool stuff you have. And I've told you that before. I don't necessarily say it as much as I used to.
Well, it's funny because we all are inspired by other things. So it's funny. Like, it's a weird circle, right? Because you were inspired to have your own studio because of the experiences you had at the TV studio, and then I kind of ripped off my inspiration from you, which was essentially my own inspiration.
Yes.
But my inspiration was a ripoff of the old Niagara Falls High School band room. Like, I wanted my media room to have that energy that my friend Paul Wose, who passed away last year, the energy of his band room, where everybody went to the band room. Like, even if you weren't in band, you were in the band room. I wanted this culture of where kids were coming, they'd be safe and accepted, and we'd have a good time, and we'd also produce video, but at the same time we had a lot of fun.
Yes.
And I think the energy of having a place, and that was kind of the energy that I felt at the Podcast Precinct.
And that was my idea, because I want it to be warm and welcoming. I don't want it to be. I mean, it was a school classroom.
Yeah.
The one that lasted the longest was the school classroom. So I wanted it to be like, oh wow, look at this stuff. Here's a bunch of jerseys on the wall. And even though it didn't look the best, there was a story to tell with it.
No, but I loved the look of it. I feel like it had a great look.
When we first moved into that studio, you were there. I think your first appearance was before we had a pod cave. We had that long table towards the back part of the room.
Right.
And we had kind of that couch area too. I didn't know the science of all this stuff. And this is the important part of, if you're going to be a leader or if anything, if you're going to try and do something, you have to learn to grow. And Nate came in, helped me build the pod cave properly, and we soundproofed the heck out of that thing with bed sheets.
Yep.
With bed sheets. I remember the first.
And it really worked quite well, because people could be in the cave, but they could also be at the couches. And, you might hear the occasional bleed, but for the most part, it worked pretty well. You could do 2 podcasts at the same time.
Obviously, a lot of people have day jobs. So I want to be flexible. I want to keep people coming in. And there was a very good stretch between 2000 and late 2020 and mid to late 2022 where we had constant foot traffic in there. I'm talking probably 20 shows recording a week out of there. But I wanted to have that flexibility to have multiple spaces. So figuring out the pod cave was a really nice way to do that and separate. And it wasn't perfect, but it worked.
And nothing is. So it's 2020. It's COVID.
Yeah.
People are trying to figure out how to do this at home, and people are starting to create content. And I mean, I think in the summertime, when things had settled down a little bit, I reached out to you and said, hey, I'd like to be on. I don't know if I reached out to you or you reached out to me. I'm not sure exactly. I feel like you reached out to me for that initial thing.
I think you had mentioned that you were listening to the show, because I was actively sharing on a Facebook. I said, hey, you want to come make it? Or maybe I did initially offer it. It feels like forever ago.
Yeah,
I think I may have offered it.
I think it was a text message, and you said something like, what do you want to talk about? And I think we ended up settling on top 10, because this was Eat, Sleep, and List.
Yes.
And this was top 10 spaceships.
Yes. Yeah.
And that like I spent hours trying to just work on my list. I
Was that
probably
nice?
prepared more for that list than anything else. Well, maybe the second time I was on, I prepared even more. But first time I spent a lot of time like I showed it to him. What do you think? Showed it to my son. Like, what did I miss anything? Like, he's like, like. And then I went and I just fell in love with it. I mean, I just fell in love with that process, and then I was hooked.
It was great.
And a lot of that, here I am doing this now, as well as providing a space for so many other people.
It was therapeutic, and I mean that's why I got into podcasting, was to be able to talk. Like, I'm not a very social person. Like, I'm obviously comfortable with you, so we can talk about anything. But if we go into an environment where I'm not comfortable with people and they start talking football and stuff, I don't know whether to pull back what I know and not sound like a snob.
Right.
I don't know. I don't want to ever come off snobbish, but also I can be going into a room and talking football with people who know way more than me, and I sound inadequate. So I'm not very social, and the very few times I wanted to talk about stuff, like it was usually over social media,
Right.
and it wasn't reciprocated well. So I wanted to do podcasting so I can feel comfortable talking openly about anything, and that's what Eat Sleep List really was the best at. The football, 2-point conversation was good at that. The video game show, push start, panel discussion, all that stuff was good, but Eat Sleep List was like the one that really helped me get things off my chest.
I mean, I go back and the tags will be on the screen for that, for the audio versions, and there's some really, really great episodes of that pod. Like, there really are. Like, and it's grown because obviously you have co-hosts now.
Yes.
And I haven't been on in a while, but I got to come back on for a second one, and I think we talked about sports names.
We did the sports team name list, and then I think we did
one actually in the building, in my other building, where
yes,
you guys
we did
actually
two.
came in.
We did two. So there was the one me and Dan was on the sidelines, so we did the Disney list.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then
right.
we came back about a month later, and all three of us did our the theme parks list.
The theme parks that we make our own theme.
Yeah,
parks.
we make our own theme
I forgot
parks.
about
Some
the
of
theme
them
park.
that was the very first.
And it's very funny. Even those podcasts, I probably prepared for those podcasts more than I prepared for my own.
Yeah.
Talk about why podcasting is important from a psychological standpoint, because I think you and I are in a similar vibe with what podcasting does for us, like on a mental health concept.
Absolutely, and that's been the focus of my newer YouTube show with Eat Sleep List, is the psychological just benefits of just talking. The social media age is so weird. Like, we live in an age where there's not a lot of face-to-face interaction. You don't actually hear words. We're reading words between each other. There's no emotion. There's no tone. Text messages dominate. Unfortunately, I grew up in the text message age. I'd rather take a text message than a phone call most days.
Right.
But I also realized that just I wasn't really connecting with people. And from a psychology perspective, we all have something to say, even if we don't say it out loud, or our brains are nonstop churning, thinking about information, weird stuff. And you just got to get it off your chest. You got to just talk about it. And I've made so many incredible friends through podcasting. Not okay, you were my friend, let's go podcast. No, I actually met people and connected with people through podcasting. Two of my best friends, Brian and Dan. I knew Dan prior to podcasting, but I didn't know Brian. We became best friends through our passion of certain things, talking. And I would not, if I didn't podcast, I wouldn't have had those connections. I wouldn't have had spoken to those people. They wouldn't be two of the people I regard, two of the highest regarded people in my life. It's that there's social benefits to it. There's the just talking. I'm sure you felt this when you're done, when you record an episode, whatever you guys go, an hour and a half, even if it goes 2 hours, you hit that stop button and you just feel relief, because everything that you had been thinking about, everything that was on your mind, you just spit into a microphone. You just talked about it.
Yeah.
And if people want to listen, great. If not, whatever. I said it. It's out there. It's off my mind. I said it, and I'm feeling good for it. I have like it's not like I'm a WebMD diagnoser, but uh but like anxiety, like that's always been something that I've had that I don't really talk about. Like I get super weird. Like I'm nervous to be excited about stuff. I'm nervous to express issues, regret, embarrassment, all that stuff. But for some reason, when I have a microphone in front of my face and I can talk about it in a healthy way, it's better. It's easier.
I look at it from the same way, from a slightly different lens. Is that when you're younger, you're creative.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, when you're in
Yes.
high school, even when you're in college, you're like experimenting with things. When you're a little kid, you're playing with Legos or whatever it is, or you're in sports or whatever you're playing an instrument. You're in the drama club. You're just drawing. You write poetry, whatever. And then you get to a point in your life whether you get in your 20s or something, and it's like, no, you don't do that anymore. It's like I was a high school drama director for a lot of years, and like kids will like not do a play ever again after they graduate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's something called community theater. You could go do that.
Yeah.
And some of my very close friends, and one of them's a podcaster here now, and she does one. And
Yep.
and I love working with Audrey. Again, one of my favorite students from back in the day. And now she's still performing up in Buffalo, and she's an amazing performer. And now she's got a theater podcast. And it's just this concept of having, like, and even so the standpoint of like, you stop being creative because now you got a job and you got a house and you got a this and you got a that, and you stop being creative. And I feel like you just you can get wrapped up in all kind of the adulting, as it were.
That's for sure, because there's such an emphasis on work and all work, no fun.
Yeah.
Like it's just like this weird, like as soon as you're booted out of high school, right? As soon as you get that diploma, the world just seems really heavy. And I was around, I was in construction.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people who grew up aspiring to be a construction worker.
Right.
But there are some, but you're around a lot of people who had dreams of doing something more.
Right.
And didn't try. They just left them as dreams, or they actually pursued them and failed. And this is where they ended up.
Right.
So, and that starts to wear on you a lot, so it's nice to, like, you're around those people, and it's like a succubus. It just kind of drags you down.
One of the struggles for me was just many of my high school friends, they moved away. So then, I got into my 20s and I got into teaching, and I ended up being very creative and I worked very hard. But I can see that for a lot of the folks that do podcasting, a lot of it is just a chance to hang out with your guys. Like, maybe you wouldn't see those guys on a regular basis if you didn't have, like, hey, Wednesdays we get together and we pod.
For some people, like, there's a lot of people that I see on a regular basis that are close to me that are like, oh, he's going to podcasts again. It's like, it's really, like, you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. You are right. Like, this is my friend time. Like, you spend time, you go shopping with your friends, you go see movies with your friends, you go on all these trips with your friends. This is mine. I don't do that. Like, I don't want to go out and have to spend money to be around my friends. I talk, and we organize it, we record it, and we use it. But this is my friendship time. I mean, I've a lot of meals around podcasting. It was definitely a thing. All right, every Monday, this is our thing. We're checking in, and this is what we do.
You've been doing Eat, Sleep, and List a long time, but then you decided you wanted to kind of try something new with that concept, because it's and no offense, because you're still doing the other one.
Yes.
But this one, talk a little bit about this new version, this kind of more personal version of Eat, Sleep, and List that you're doing right now.
So, we kind of lightly touched on it, but one of my biggest regrets is not doing video. Back at the old studio, with a lot of stuff, like, audio is great. It's easy to listen to on the go, but video is king for everybody. So Eat, Sleep, List, I was like, if I'm going to do any show and make it a YouTube thing, I think this is the one. I've been wanting to do, YouTube. I want to do something cool for a long time, but not just something cool, but something that it was just me, which sounds selfish, but it's on my time, right? I message you, hey, is this studio open at 10, 11 o'clock at night? Can I come in and just get my stuff in? And I do. And like, and this isn't like a dig at Brian or Dan, but when which I'm very grateful for their, their co-hosting ability on the audio version, but we're on each other's time clocks too.
Right.
When you have a co-host or multiple co-hosts, you're on each other's clocks, times. And if something comes up, damn, we can't record,
Right.
or we got to change a time, and it snowballs, and it happens. It's life. It happens. So with the YouTube show, it's on my time. It's all me, which is something that, excuse me, that I kind of lost along the way, right? I was so busy trying to connect to other people and do stuff for other people that I never really had time for myself.
Which is
I never
ironic
did my
because
things.
we're literally doing the exact same thing right now.
I feel like you're the
I
opposite.
spent a year and a half building, I spent a year, it's almost a year now, building this space.
Yes.
Like where we are now. And it was an amazing year. And it's leading to so many cool things. But somewhere along the way, I'm like, I own a podcast studio and a creator studio space, and I don't have my own podcast.
Yes.
So I really struggled with trying to find the concept, and I'm like, I don't want to do a soccer one or
Right.
a Doctor Who one or any of these things that would pigeonhole me. So I said, you know what? If I'm going to pigeonhole myself, I want to find something that I think there's not a lot of. And I tried to find, are there a lot of podcasts about podcasting?
Right.
And I feel like if anyone who's created content or is interested in creating content, why not have one where you can hear why people do it? But more importantly, I think we're all very proud of our content. And I want people to take a minute, sit down on the gray couch with me and say, I'm really proud of what I'm doing, because we certainly get enough hate. Like, oh, what are you thinking with that? And, you're not of this, and, you don't understand that.
Microphones should be more expensive. I love that one. Microphones should be more expensive. Not everybody should have a podcast.
Right. Either. I don't think everything I'm doing is right, but like that's why this is a collaborative, this building that I'm in.
Yeah.
Because I want people to say, hey, and I've got several podcasters that are great partners with me that we have figured out how to improve what we do.
Yeah.
And whether it's the paint color, whether it's the microphones, or this is hey, did you know there's a setting on this that will help you fix that problem? And that's the collaborative experience that I'm trying to have here. But you're totally right. And I kind of went off way on a tangent
fine.
with that.
You brought up some good things. You should be, like, everybody should be proud of stuff that they create. You know how many people start a podcast and then quit after an episode or two? All right, so if you're...
Do you know what the statistic is for what the average number of people
I don't know
get
the number
past?
specifically, but it's actually very high.
90-something% of podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes.
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
And then I forget there's another statistic to get to 100, let's say. I think it's something like only 2%. So everybody jokes about how everybody has a podcast, but they really don't. There's a lot of podcasts on a lot of these sites that if you go, they haven't recorded in 4 years, 3 years,
Yes.
2 years. They did 4 episodes, but they're tying up a lot of bandwidth on Spotify. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's all very true. And yeah, there's always the critics. I had a guy, it really frustrated me. He criticized the pod cave. He goes, "Oh, this is not what I thought it was." And I'm like, "Well, go build your own pod cave, then, man. You're paying me. I didn't ask you to be here. I want you here."
And I'm not making a lot of money over here, but I need to pay my rent or there won't be a building.
That's correct.
And
That's
some people don't agree necessarily with what what they're getting for the amount that I'm going to charge them.
You probably undercharge. Like, I'm not saying this to anybody watching this that pays to be here. Don't panic, because Meranto's not that guy, but I know I undercharged at my studio. Like,
you definitely undercharged.
There's very much undercharged. I could have had that place still live and kicking.
And why did you undercharge?
Okay, so it's a personal thing. Like, I wanted bodies in there, but I also remembered what it was like to try and start my own podcast and how overwhelming and expensive it could be. Right? I didn't have a whole lot of spare cash, but if you're going to do a podcast, laptop, microphone, headphones, at the very least. Plus, you got to buy a recording program, something to edit with. I knew that was...
Sound absorption material.
That, too.
Like, even if you're just, what are you using? Like, where are you setting this up? Are you going to have a dedicated space, or you can use your dining room? If you use your dining room, you know what the echo is going to be. And if you got a dog, forget about it.
Yes. Yeah, that's all factors that come into play.
But you charged less because you wanted to support people that were trying to get this going.
Yes, that's all.
And that's why I don't charge a lot. Most people aren't doing it about the monetization.
No, I mean, like I said, it would have been nice to prop that building up. And if I had charged probably what I should have, I think I would still have a lot of. I would still have money in the bank. Let's just say
Right.
that. But no, I didn't want to. Basically, like I felt like extorting, but like I don't want people to be like, oh, I really can't afford to do this, because it shouldn't be that. Like I feel like the privilege to be able to talk about whatever you want, you really can't put a price on that.
Right.
So and there was a stretch where I was breaking even. There was a stretch where I was making a little bit of money because of all the traffic.
Right.
And
So, like, my kids aren't in college. I'm not paying my rent. I'm not paying my mortgage with this. This is a passion project for me.
100%.
The same way people do their podcast is a passion project. So I would like to make some money, but, I understand some months it'll be thin. And there's anxiety that comes with that. And I'm sure you probably, like me, woke up a couple times in the middle of the night, like, with that shortness of breath because, like, am I spending too much money on something?
If you're going to do it, you have to love it first. I think a lot of people come into this world thinking they're going to make hundreds upon hundreds, maybe even thousands upon thousands of dollars out of the gate. I remember there were shows signing up and to be there. And they're like, yeah, we're going to make all this. I'm like, no, that's not how it works, guys. Like if you're going into this with, again, running the studio,
right.
You said it's a passion project. If you go in this with the mentality of, I got to make money, if it doesn't make money for a month, 2 month stretch, or you're just breaking even, you're going to get frustrated with it and tear it all down.
Right.
But if you're doing this because you honestly love it, which you have been doing, you've even though you've only had this specific studio, well, it's basically 2-3 years now, technically.
The building, a building,
a building, some building
coming up on 3 years in May, I guess.
Yeah, which is awesome.
But
even though you've only had this emerge for 3 years, you've been doing this all your life, and even though you retired to technically get away from it. In a sense, you came right back into it.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've actually reduced my costs for some people. I've actually given up a little bit of money because I really want those folks, even if it's just like, hey guys, you know what? Each of you just $20 less.
Yeah.
And maybe that it's a terrible business decision, but it's a human decision. Like I still want to be like that guy that kids wanted to, now they're all adults hey, you know what? This guy's trying to do something, trying to help me out. And I think I would rather have that loyalty because they understand I'm in it with them. I want to give them whatever support.
Yeah.
And you did that with all of us when, there's a lot of people, whether their pods are still going or not, owe you a debt of gratitude because even if it was for 2 years or 3 years or 3 months, if they enjoyed what they were doing, you gave them an opportunity to do it in a place. And I think that is something hopefully you realize that you accomplished.
Yeah. Even though it doesn't feel like it some days, but it is. Like we just did the personal accomplishment list for the Eat Sleep List YouTube channel. That was one of those things, was having that studio to give people a pathway. Whether they took the ball and ran with it, came a couple weeks and just disappeared out of my life forever.
Right.
I could still hang my head high knowing that, okay, I gave people an opportunity to do so. And I think I did a count. The last Eat Sleep List episode we recorded at that studio, I think I counted 50 total podcasts that had recorded at least once there. And I think a little over 60 individuals,
sure.
Probably even a little bit more than that have ever that had a show or paid me dues at some point.
Right.
So it's really cool to kind of look back and see those numbers. You wish it could have gone on forever. But
it's anything is tough. Like, I don't care if you're an actor or a TV show, like any of these things. Some of them, if you think about the number of TV shows, movies, athletes that never really ever get to the level that they thought they would. I don't think podcasts are significantly different.
Right.
Some of it you're not passionate enough. Like,
not consistent.
You're not consistent enough. You don't have a supportive home life that, allows you to do it. Your job is too demanding, or you're out of a job because you got laid off. What are some of the topics, like the list that you plan? I know you've already done a couple, but what are some of the types of lists of things that you plan to cover?
So, I mean, it's a variety of things. So I separated it into 2 days, which is awesome. Mirror List Monday, which is reflective stuff, goal setting, just before we started recording this, I recorded the Dream Vacations list. All right,
cool.
about setting goals and working towards the goals to go see that place because life is short. You only get one shot at this, and if you want to go see something, you go do it. On the flip side, our Fun List Friday, which is basically what Eat Sleep List was, where it's like, okay, pop culture list.
Right.
We can, I could do a spaceship list, but when the episode drops, it'll be the day after National Pokemon Day, which is February 27th.
Right.
So I'm going to drop this on February 28th and just talk about Pokemon and whatever. I discuss my history with it, and I list my top 10 favorites.
Going back to this wellness aspect, like I felt really good when like, wow, 2,000 people like my TikTok.
Yeah.
I know that's not a lot,
but
it's not zero.
This is the personal accomplishment thing. Is it a lot for you?
It's a lot for me because I never had a
That's
TikTok before.
That's all that matters. Is it if it's good, if it's great for you, then that's all that matters. There's videos that go millions.
And so the Kelsey brothers have this great podcast.
Yes.
Okay, but let's be honest. It's no better or worse than any other podcast.
100%.
The difference is it's successful because there's two guys with a really known last name.
Yes.
And one of them happens to date a really famous person with an even bigger last name.
Yes.
And let's be honest, that's why that podcast is successful.
100%.
Like if they were just, the Johnsons, like if it was just, you and your brother, that I remember from high school,
Yes.
like it might be a better podcast, but you may not be well known because unfortunately neither one of you are dating Taylor Swift.
No.
If you don't have an established brand, it's going to take you a long time and you may get lucky. But most of the people that get lucky I don't think they'll tell you that it was lucky. I think if you look at the guys that have, million followers and they're not as well known, they did not start with a million followers.
Correct.
They got lucky. There was a little bit of luck, but by the time they got lucky, they had put the work in, so the content was of quality.
Absolutely.
Like if you look at their first episode, it probably stunk.
Yeah.
But they're good now, and they found their niche and the way they do their production quality, whether it's a producer or whatever it was, the lighting. But then they also got better at what they were talking about.
Yes. And it's a difficult thing for a lot of people. Like I see this, we're in this age where instant satisfaction, validation, if it doesn't come fast enough, you're like, all right, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Like Mr. Beast. Who was Mr. Beast before the YouTube channel? He said his story. He tried for college. He ended up dropping out, but he planned and put in the work so he can go and be famous and do all these cool videos where he's giving away money and providing water and electricity in all these places. Like, you got to work towards that. That's where the love of it comes from. Because if you're not having fun and you're doing it for money, then you're.
So if you're not big and famous, none of us are. How do you motivate yourself each week to do this?
Yeah, that is the challenge because it is tough.
You got a kid now.
Yeah.
You and your wife got opposite schedules in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, how do you motivate yourself when you're making formula at night and packing up the bag for tomorrow and all that stuff? How do you keep yourself motivated to prepare a couple times a week?
Yeah, now it's a little bit of a challenge, but the little downtime that I get, I plan. Like I have the notebook now. Like and I always wait. Like I don't want to plan ahead, like too far ahead.
Right.
But if I'm sitting, I'm like, man, what do I want to talk about for this week? And I gotta feel it.
What was the biggest challenge you think you faced?
My own mental hurdles, probably the biggest thing. I told you, like, I have communication issues. There's a lot of anxiety, self-doubt. I'm self-doubt. I excel at. I beat myself up probably better than anybody else ever has. And that's the one thing. Like, there's times where when I had 26,000 followers on that 2 Point Conversation Facebook page, the pressure was immense. All right, the pressure to deliver, the pressure to not say the wrong thing. It was delivered. I can openly admit it. I am afraid of success. I just don't know. Like, there's always, the more successful you get, the more naysayers you get. and I've always kind of believed what everybody said about me, and that's just something I've had to work on. Where this kind, Tank deals with it. Tank Talk, Jake deals with it all the time. Burn your equipment or stuff like that. That's stuff that I take really hard. Like, I took it personally. Like, I'm doing this out of love and passion, and I want to, have fun along the way.
Well, it's funny because we talked before we got on the air, is my son has a podcast that he's involved in, and it's our most popular one.
Yeah.
The four of them put in a ridiculous amount of work.
Yeah.
And my son happens to be the one that's the guy on the right that tends to be kind of negative about the things they talk about. And it's not, and he'll often get comment like the guy he's just being negative to be negative. Like, no, he's negative about stuff because he expects products that he watches to put an effort in, and be more than they are. So he's critical. So he's and it's not for clickbait.
Right.
It's not, I mean, I can tell you point blank, it's not for clickbait. But his funny thing is, how he deals with the negative comments. He just doesn't read. He doesn't read any of the comments, which is great because people will go at him and he's like, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
So we'll sometimes mention him. He just like, I really don't care, because he's like, you know what? They don't have to watch me.
Yes.
They don't have to watch me. Like, they can. And he said to me the one time, like, it would be bad for my mental health if I went and read those, because maybe I would get caught up in it.
That's what got me. It's especially hard when you're the one doing the creating, and it adds another perspective about enjoying other people's content.
How much do you respond to comments, positive, negative?
I always endorse positive. I always will, heart, like, comment back for positive stuff. Negative, this is what led to the downfall of the 2 Point Conversation show, especially the Facebook page, was that it was becoming overwhelmingly negative, and this was my baby, so I had to protect it. And I'd argue with people in comments, and it's just like, and I fell into the trap.
Right.
It's a trap. It 100% is. And you say one wrong thing, and everybody just piles on you, and that was my biggest downfall with that. If
you're responding on social media to people thinking that you're going to change their mind, or like they're going to be like, you know what, I'm seeing the light of day now and I'm not going to be this person anymore, then you really probably should just never, ever comment again. If you feel like you've got to get your point out, go for it. But I think if you're going to have your own content, you almost have to have a pretty thick skin.
Yeah, there's a belief, like, I don't know, everybody feels the need to have an opinion about everything. And while that may, obviously you're entitled to an opinion, you don't necessarily have to put everything out there, every thought that crosses your mind out there.
What are some of your best practices that, if I was like sitting down with you for the first time and said, hey, I want to start a podcast, or I want to create content, can you give, since we're Eat, Sleep, and List, can you think of 5 best practices quick off the top? It doesn't have to be 5.
For
any type of best practices that you would recommend to anybody, whether it's a piece of technology, whether it's, process or scheduling, like what are 5 things it doesn't have to be 5, but what are things that you would recommend to someone? What are some of your best practices?
I can't. So for creating any kind of art or entertainment, whether it's podcasting or whatever, it's the consistency factor. That is always number one, because we're creatures of habit, right? We're routine people. If you are tuning in expecting to see a new TV show episode of something you like, let's say Everybody Loves Raymond. I love that show. So if you're tuning in to see the newest episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, and they show a repeat, you kind of get a little bit disheartened, right? And now, okay, your whole schedule is messed up. There's a slim chance you might not come back the following week whenever a new episode is supposed to drop. It's like that with podcasting, where you're a part of somebody's routine. If you drop it every Wednesday morning, that person may be looking forward to you putting out that episode Wednesday morning. And if it doesn't show up, you just screwed up their whole routine, and they may not come back. So consistency is number one.
Well, that's what I think, and then I'll jump in there real quick and I'll let you keep going. I think you guys did that with Eat, Sleep, and List, because like you don't try to do it weekly. It's the big one, the one you did with the guys. Like you were like, we'll do a season.
Yeah.
And you'll do a certain number of episodes. And then like you'll get those episodes done, and then you kind of like then you'll maybe come back and take a hiatus and you'll come back and do another season. You're not trying to do 52 episodes a year.
It did turn into that because I loved it that much and I realized how beneficial it was to me. I think we only did it at like 2 or 3 actual seasons, and then it's been full bore ever since.
So what other best practices can you think
So
of?
there's that one, is to be passionate. Like if I'm listening to somebody talk and their energy is just off, monotone, I'm going to turn that podcast off.
Right.
I'm not going to listen to it. You have to be, if you're going to speak into a microphone, which essentially is you're speaking directly to people, you have to have energy. Like you got to be excited to be in there and sound, because people eat that up. People love that stuff. If you sound like you care what you're talking about, people are going to care what you are talking about.
Right.
So that would be my second one. Third is with this is something I dabble in too. If you're going to create a podcast, it can't be just a podcast. Like, again, I'm going to reference Tank. Tank does a really good job doing TikTok, doing the shorts. It's not just an audio show. It's a YouTube show with clips. He was having me write blogs this year, which is a really great opportunity. I feel a lot of stuff going wrong towards the end of last year, so I had to taper off, but I was grateful for that opportunity. Like, if you want this to be something bigger, you have to have other means. Mine was social media. Mine was a social media page. Mine was, I did it. It wasn't consistent, but it was blogging of my own. It's all that little stuff that goes hand in hand. So it's got to be, if you're going to do something and you want it to be really good, it's got to be bigger than a podcast.
Right. Interesting.
Number 4, I would say you got to find a way to be different. If you're going to, again, if you want to be good, you got to stand out. You counted 16 or 17 Buffalo Bills podcasts in the area. I can assure you there's well over 50. Some are more known than others. All right. Their entire podcast networks, and they have like 6 to 7 Buffalo Bills podcasts specifically. If you want to do a Buffalo Bills podcast, what are you doing differently than all these other shows? Like, do you have a theme, a format that's different than everybody else? Because if you're not, you're just like everybody else. You're never gonna break out because you're not different.
Right.
You maybe get your friends to listen. Every now and then you get a new listener or two, but you're no different. If you're not finding a way that's to stand out. That's why I like Eat Sleep List, is because it's different and it can vary every week as far as what I can talk about. I can do just podcast form, but one week I can talk about sports. The next week, my favorite teachers. The week after that, my favorite places to grab a slice of pizza.
Right. Like, I'll listen to some podcasts to try to support people, but I may not have any interest in it. And I'm like, but if they do occasionally something else, then it's like maybe I'll at least listen to that episode because it was something slightly different.
For sure.
And that's the thing, like, that's like going back to the 716, they started off as a Star Wars pod.
Yes.
And then they realized they weren't growing, and then they decided to do reacts.
Yes.
And then they started reacting to
when they blew
things.
up.
And all of a sudden they went from like 100 followers to like, I think 3,000 in a day.
Yeah.
And they had their, 45,000 views on YouTube of their pod and got picked up and liked by a bunch of things. And they realized there wasn't that, you couldn't just do Star Wars. And there were some growing pains with that because some people didn't agree with that, but that they should not be just doing Star Wars. So now they do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And their brand is exploded because we also have a cast of characters. Like, we don't just have 4 people on the pod. I'm a regular contributor. They do D&D on Friday, and it's all part of the same YouTube channel.
Brand,
and then we watch DC movies, and that's usually when I jump in. I sit and watch the DC movies. And then they have a TikTok, and they do Instagram Reels, and they do shorts, and they do gaming. So like but again, with 4 people, 5 counting myself and several other people that are involved with the D&D, they have an entourage of people that are involved in creating the content.
Yes.
So it's easier to spread out a lot of the workload, so to speak, too.
Which helps out a lot. So it's so important.
Any other advice?
So that was my
What else
4th
you got?
one, right?
Yeah.
My 5th one is work with as many people as you can and try to change. So I'll give you an example. So in professional wrestling, which I did a little bit for like 3, 4, 5 years, maybe close to that. You want to work with as many different people as you possibly can to get better. There's certain things, right? There's certain cues. There's anybody can talk about a match and pre-plan a match out there and behind the scenes, right before you go out. But it's what happens when you're out and the crowd is dead, where the whole idea is to get a reaction. Okay, we got to call some stuff on the fly. We got to change some things up and figure out how to make this better. Podcasting is like that too. I do have a lot of passions, and that's why I had so many podcasts at one time. But the bare bones reason I did that was to work with a lot of different people. So
right. That's a really good point, which we didn't even talk about at all, is the amount of people that, you got to try some different kinds of things, and then you settled in with things that worked for you.
Absolutely. I had so many different personalities. At 2 point at one time I had 5. Well, actually, it started from 5 co-hosts. It eventually was 10. But then I'd go work with. I do the panel discussion and talk comic books with 2 other people here. I did the video game show with 1 co-host at first, then it became 2. You learn how to communicate and communicate well. You learn different tricks, cadences, and everyone's like, oh, you're there. One incident, somebody felt like I was not focused on what we were doing, but I want to be good at this.
Right.
I want to be really good at this and get better and better at communicating, because there was just sometimes you record an episode and it wasn't working. Something wasn't working, so I have to go in and figure it out. I got to go learn how to provoke people into talking. Right. When I was doing the WrestleCast one, I had a kid who had just won states from a school around here,
right.
And I'm trying to have a conversation with him, and he's giving me nothing. It's like 1-word answers to really simple stuff, not really explaining things, and I'm like, this is not good. I have to learn how to figure out ways to bring out more information out of people.
I have learned to accept the fact that just because I did something before doesn't mean it still works.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean that it's good enough.
Correct.
So I am trying to find new ways to be better at what I do, to provide better production services.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why, my son and I, our podcast, when we do it, tends to be like, well, let's try this. Let's see if I can use this to figure out what apps and I'm going to use to try to make my TikToks quicker, or how to make short content better, or what kind of graphic passages can I buy, and how do I get better B-roll, and I'm trying to experiment as much as I can here. Now that I have the brick and mortar, now it's all right, how do I get better at production? How do I get better at finding apps and things that work?
Yeah.
How do I get better analytics on what I just did? Trying to find ways so I can be a better consultant to these podcasts, not just a production person, but also try to figure out hey, have you thought about doing this? Or have you collaborated with another pod or whatever? Those are the kinds of things that I think that some best practices that I'm trying to come up with a list of, so that I can say to people well, how do you market your podcast? What short content are you making? Something as silly. I read an article about the thumbnail.
It's very important. That's the attraction, right? Right. If your thumbnail is bad, I mean, physically or on YouTube, people aren't gonna. You
can have a lot of fun with that, and it's funny. I don't have time for that. It's
these little things. Yeah.
I try to explain to people if then maybe, and I don't want to tell them not to do their podcast, but if you're not going to do the other things, then you don't get frustrated because no one watched. It's funny, we got that award the other night, and it's very exciting, and I'm very appreciative, but I'm that's not good enough. How many new businesses don't make it? And I want to be here in 5 years. I still want to be here in 5 years. And if I don't get better at what I do, why would people stay with me?
If you knew how to run this place, you're doing a great job of it. But if you knew everything, every little aspect, and you weren't growing at all, it probably wouldn't be a fun challenge for you either.
But I don't think you can. Because you can't, because there's, first of all, trends. You have to know what's the trends are. It's like music. Like, think about music. Like, I'm not a Kendrick Lamar fan.
Right.
I don't dislike Kendrick Lamar, but I'm not going to listen to Kendrick Lamar's music. Like,
No.
I look like a dope listening to Kendrick Lamar's music, but I can read the lyrics and listen to what he's saying and have an appreciation for what he's saying.
Correct.
And say, you know what? I'm not going to be listening in the gym. I'm not going to probably be in the gym having Kendrick Lamar on my headphones, but I can also, though, respect him
Yes.
and like his content and say, oh my God, like what he's trying to say is really cool.
Yeah.
So, but I have to know what that means. I have to know I have to know what's going on. I can't be locked into, what I know and what I'm interested in and then pretend like then I'm going to be relevant to the younger people that want to use my space. I have to try to keep being aware of softwares and what the trends are on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and being able to say, hey, have you thought about doing this? Because this is really popular right now.
Yeah, I noticed that like when you and I were kind of lightly discussing doing the Eat Sleepless YouTube show, just like your ideas, like there's stuff I hadn't even thought of. And you're like, oh, we could try this, we could try that, this animation, this program, various things. And all very helpful. It's been fun for me to watch you grow. I don't know if you realize how much you've grown as far as knowing what to do with podcasting, but
our stuff in the beginning was terrible.
Tank and
I have talked about this. Like, we had such terrible ideas at the beginning of his podcast. And it was because we were trying to kind of be like, sports stooges. Like, we didn't want to be like real polished, but that's fine. And we make fun of it, but we don't regret it.
Right.
We say, well, that was an idea.
Yep.
And there are episodes that, we joke about, like, well, that was an episode. Like, it's over, thank God. But even like, mistakes that I made, like even something as stupid is like, well, a black wall is really cool. Let's paint it black.
Yeah.
And then recognizing, well, that looks terrible on camera. Like things like that you don't realize because you just think it looks cool, but not realizing it's not a question of it looks like when you're looking at it. It's what does it look like when you throw a camera on it?
Right.
Like, what does it look like when you actually try to mic that space?
Yeah.
Like, does that work acoustically?
You've always shown how adaptable you are, and that's where I think why people keep coming back to you. If you were a mean old curmudgeon just set in your ways, people would probably not be thrilled with their experience here. But you've always been open to adapting things, and that's so important as like a leader of anybody, is to be adaptable and to look at stuff like that.
I have to make sure that everything I do for every single client is unique to that client.
Yep.
Like, there isn't one pod that's like another pod.
Right.
In terms of, because we have like 7 different spaces in the building and we utilize them all very differently in terms of the lighting, the mics, the colors, like whatever, the props, the way we produce, the whether it's live, whether it's edited, whether it's, like all kinds of things. In each one, I try to meet the needs of the client.
Yes.
I can't be cookie cutter with it. Like, if I'm cookie cutter with it, it looks cookie cutter.
Yeah, because if every show felt the same, it wouldn't be very fun for me. It wouldn't be fun for me at all. So,
as we wrap it up, like, any thank yous and shout outs that you think you want to kind of, things that you kind of want to take this opportunity to publicly kind of say?
Oh my God, yeah. I am very thankful for, again, the life I've lived and all the podcasting stuff that I've done. First and foremost, you, we talked about the circle already. I just want to reiterate that, your media production program led to me wanting to have a voice in podcasting and create a cool studio space where people feel welcome and it feels natural to them. So thank you for that. My parents, who, even though they don't necessarily understand everything that I do, they try their best to support it. Like, my mom watches I don't think she ever really listened to my podcast, but she's been watching the Eat Sleepless YouTube channel. And like my sister and everybody's like, they're giving me that support, which is awesome, which is a really good feeling. So I thank them for that. They've always done that. That's with anything. Even pro wrestling, they didn't necessarily understand it, but they still supported it to the best of their ability. All my co-hosts over the years, like, too many to name. But right now, it's Brian and Dan, who I've been podcasting with in some way, shape, or form for many years. My friend Will, Andrew, Johnny, like these are guys who I keep in frequent touch with about podcasting. Like that's an important part too, is that community.
Right.
That community. If I lose that community of podcasting, if I'm really, really, really out there on my own, then this doesn't become. It's tough. It's very, very tough. And I mean, I'm still thankful, even though the podcast precinct isn't here. You know, it's. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the lessons I learned from it, all the different people that I met through it, all the stories I got to hear. You know, but just meeting people was like my favorite thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, my wife, like I've always been so jealous of her friendship circle. You know, she's got, to her, great friends. They're super supportive. They're always helping out at her cafe whenever she needs assistance. And I've always been envious of that. I've always been okay, I got to get a 40-hour work week job, and been miserable doing it almost every step of the way, whether it's construction or some other work in retail somewhere. So I've always been envious of her ability, her support system to do this cafe. And I guess in a weird sort of way, I wanted to replicate that with my own thing.
Yeah.
And obviously it didn't pan out the way that I'd hoped, but I still like it. She's putting up with a lot, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think like that's, even, there's definitely like a difference for guys. I think for whatever, I think podcasting is like a big thing for guys. Like it's, my wife calls it mansplaining, like, because there's a lot of mansplaining in the podcast world. But I also feel like that, a lot of women, we're fortunate to have a few women podcasts and a bunch of women podcasters in the building now. And they're doing it for the same reasons, though. There's a lot of mental health on it. They have something they want to say, and I enjoy working with all of them. And I thank my wife because she was the one who said to me, like, so she's the president of our company. So she was harassing me she's like, you don't have any women podcasters. And I said, well, you're the president. And by the end of the day, we had a new women's podcast.
Which one?
The A&B Conversation.
Oh,
so she knew Ariana because they worked together.
Oh, no kidding.
And
okay.
then
I didn't know they were connected.
That she called her up and said, she knew that you should start a podcast at Rich's Place, and they came and met me the next day, and we designed a podcast studio for them. We created a whole special bougie area just for the girls.
It's so nice.
And I love working with them because it's so different than everything else that we do.
Yeah.
But they collaborate with a lot with other podcasts, and they're a big part of our network. But it was really smart of my wife to recognize, to say, hey, have you thought about doing this? So, but I mean, you're right. I think I have the same thank yous. I think like I've struggled the same way. Like, I built friendships. And it's funny because I'm an old dude, but I'm hanging out with all these young folks that are podcasters, and I think of them, you and everybody, as my friends because, like we all have something in common. It's something we can all talk about, and like we did today.
Yeah,
we're gonna wrap it up. I just want to thank Matt for all the years that I've known him, as a great student and now as a great friend. I don't think I would be sitting in this chair, literally be doing this, if it wasn't for the support that he's given me. And when I decided to do my own podcast about podcasting, there was nobody. I knew when I did the first season that you had to be one of the very first guests.
I appreciate that.
I'm proud of Matt. Like, as I think he's a great dad already, but I can't wait to see him like running around and teaching him to wrestle or whatever things that he ends up doing with Ben. And no, I think the world of Matt, and I think like. I'm envious of him because he knows the journeys he wants to take. He's taken so many journeys in podcasting, but now you're on this journey where you're trying to share something really important with this new content.
Yes.
It's I think I admire what you're trying to do with it. And I think that, like any journey, maybe the journey is a short journey, maybe it's a long journey. You don't know.
No.
But you gotta go on the journey.
Yeah.
And
that's what it's all about. That's what life's all about.
So that's it.
Thank you.
It's funny. I really, again, thank you, everyone. Matt's a great friend to us here at Emerge, and I'm glad that he's like kind of in the house now, so to speak.
Yeah, long time coming.
So please, all the likes at the bottom, you're going to see all his content. Please subscribe and follow his content because you won't regret it. Guy's been doing it a while. So if there's anybody that knows what he's doing, it's Matt. Please like and share. If you have a podcast or you're interested in podcasting, please reach out to us at Emerge because, again, it's a supportive, collaborative environment, and the more the merrier. The more people that come in, the more we'll all grow together. And if you have a podcast somewhere not in my network and you want to be a guest, please reach out to us, and I'd love to have you as a guest because I think folks coming in from other backgrounds that I don't have a relationship with can provide even more support for any podcasters out there. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back with another episode next week.